Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 69, March 30th, 2007. We're visiting with George Olson, Winter Area Cooperative Leader. George, where and when were you born?
I was born May 14th, 1945 in Winter, South Dakota.
Okay. And where was your family originally from? Olson sounds Scandinavian.
Of course, my grandfather came over from Sweden, and he farmed down at Wausau, Nebraska. And then my father came up here with his uncle up into the Tripp County area and started farming with him in the 30s. And the rest is history, I guess.
Okay. You have brothers and sisters?
I've got 8 sisters and 1 brother.
Big family.
Big family.
Okay, what are their names?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try. Okay.
Where are they at?
All right. My oldest sister, Dorothy Qualm, and her husband live in Torrington, Wyoming. My next sister, Mary, in Engen, and her husband live in Minneapolis. And my sister, Susie, and her husband, Bill Zanin, live in New London, Minnesota. In that area. Spicer, Minnesota, excuse me, that's right. Okay, and my sister, Sandy, lives in Huron. And my sister Carol lives in Houston. I'm going to lose somebody here. Okay, my sister Avis Clark lives in a suburb of Dallas, Texas. My sister Margie and her husband Wayne Kendall live in Yankton. And my sister Heather Johnson, her husband Mike live in Yankton. My brother Scott's on the farm here with me.
Okay. And where are you amongst all these?
I'm the third from the oldest.
You're the third from the oldest.
Yeah.
Okay. What was your father's name?
W.P. Olson, or Pete Olson.
You want to talk about him a little bit? What sort of a guy was he?
Well, he's still alive. He's 94 years old.
All right.
And I think it's interesting that I've learned some things from him, and my parents, both of them. And my wife is involved in. We get involved in community things. My dad served on the school board, local school board. My mother served in PTA and was involved because there was a lot of kids and involved in education. And this is my wife, Norma.
Hi.
Chuck. And he started out farming with his uncle. And then when they got married, in 1946, he moved up here to Ideal and bought a farm. And been farming ever since. I farmed with him. And he still lives out on the farm. My mother's still alive, and she lives there. And they still take care of themselves.
Okay. What's her name now?
Ruth.
Okay.
And she started out as a school teacher. In
country school or in
country school. In fact, that's how they met. He was living with my great uncle there, and she was teaching school, and she was walking back and forth at school, and he gave her rides. That's how that happened. But
what are some of your early memories out on the farm? These are probably from maybe into the early 50s. It's always difficult to know when somebody has their first memories of.
I was always very interested in cattle when I was little. Interesting story that my dad always tells on me is my sister Aggie, which passed away, but we had our adenoids out, and of course the folks were going to buy us a present, and my sister wanted a little nursing kit, but I wanted one of those little black white face heifers. But you did. It's 5 years old, but and then I remember, the interesting thing I remember is a blizzard of 52. We got snowed in at school with 3 of my sisters and myself.
Okay, and that was a country school program.
Yeah, it was country school.
What was the name of it?
Ideal School.
Okay.
Yeah. There were some other kids there, but I can't remember which one. We were there 4 days. My dad finally walked up and got us, and he brought a sled, and we got our books tied on the sled, and my little sister that was in school then, she rode on the sled, and the rest of us walked home. But it was 3 miles, I guess. It wasn't real far.
How long did that blizzard last?
4 days.
4 days.
In fact, we were probably there longer than that because it blew for 4 days. My dad got snowed in town in winter. Yeah, because he flew out. They flew him out, and then he walked up and got us. The weather cleared up afterwards, and it warmed up because it was nice walking home. The sun was shining.
What time of year was that?
That's interesting.
Is it a spring blizzard, a fall blizzard, or a middle of the winter one?
Dear, do you remember when the blizzard of 52 happened?
I don't know. Wasn't it in the spring?
I was thinking it was in the spring, like late February.
Yeah.
I kind of think.
Yeah.
And,
every now and then we get those.
Yeah, it was kind of it was a beautiful day out, and he was hauling wheat to town in the truck, and then couldn't get back home again. And that's how Dad got stranded in town.
Yeah.
But,
Was your dad a cooperative supporter? I'm assuming the co-ops were around here.
yeah, they were. I think probably Dad was. At that time, we did most of our fuel business with a private, because that's where he worked as a kid at the station in winter. And he when he first came up here, he farmed a little bit. Then he worked at this filling station in winter, and yeah, we did some business at cooperatives, of course, and there was a cooperative elevator in winter. And but.
When you were young, did you wanted to obviously be out here on the farm because you asked for that calf?
Yeah.
Now, some people, I get some surprising answers on occasion of what they wanted to do. Maybe they didn't want to do something so obvious.
I don't know what caused that. I mean, it was just fascination with livestock, I guess.
Sure. Life on the farm or ranch was quite a bit different then than it is today.
Very different.
How different?
I think it was and maybe it just appears that way. More physical labor and less mental stress. I think things have changed a lot in that particular. I think in those days, if you worked hard enough, you could make a living, type thing. Now you have to work smarter, not harder. And I don't mean that you can't not work, but it's a different type of. That was a physical, long days. And I'm not. We still have the long days probably, but it appears to me it's different. You do more planning, and rightfully so. And as I see cooperatives had to do too, is we have to do more business like.
Yeah.
That's we do a lot more planning and financial planning, marketing. That never heard of marketing back in those days. Actually, I mean, not like we do today.
Yeah.
And,
did your folks talk much about their experiences during the 1930s?
Oh, it harmed them for life. I don't know if that's the right word. Not harmed them, I guess. Influenced them for a lifetime. That's probably the word. They had it really tough. My grandfather lost his farm. Interesting. My dad's talked about that. He had come over from Sweden, and a big family. Those kids came over. I don't think their parents came. The kids came for some reason, and in the 30s, and he is buying this farm, my grandfather, and he sold his fat cattle and he put the money in the bank to make the payment in March or whenever it was due. The bank collapses. Like my dad said, he was only like, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, and he said, I didn't know enough about finance that he could have made the land payment instead of just leaving the money set until the due dates, you know. And he said, I always felt that I should have helped my dad. But he said, I was just a kid too, you know, and he said, and Grandpa was from Sweden and didn't understand. True story, I was scared of my grandfather till I was quite old. Not because of his broken English. And I didn't know what he was saying. And then, you know, and I didn't know, and he'd say things and laugh, you know, and I didn't know if he was laughing at me or with me, and it was kind of, and they lived so far away, so I didn't see him a lot. I saw him, you know, a couple times a year. And I just remember that about Grandpa, that, you know, and then I'd write letters to him, and he'd never write back when I was a little boy. Well, he couldn't read and write English. Grandma would write, you know, she'd answer my letter, but I never knew why until I got older. You know, I was probably 15, 16 years old until I realized what was. When I was a little boy, I just thought that was terrible. Grandpa wouldn't write to me. But it wasn't his fault. He couldn't read and write English. And, you know, it's just, but that's people that really got hurt bad in the 30s. Didn't understand the culture, didn't understand our banking system. And, you know, there's a real bad tale of, my dad said he had the money. Could have made his land payment. Lost his farmstead.
A lot of instances like that.
Yes.
I'm told that they had to restrain my grandfather from going to town and killing the banker when
yeah. I can understand where they're coming from.
Did that result in a distrust of banks later on, or did they heard from that a little bit? Bankers weren't revered as much later on as they were before that happened.
Right. I think it really hurt bankers. A second. Okay.
We'll start again here. I'll just run another track on here.
Okay, it just, you know, I think there got to be a real distrust. Norma's family survived the 30s too, and you know, her aunts, especially, her folks were a little younger in the family, and they were a little younger in the 30s. Didn't make quite the impression that it did on my parents, because mine are a little older, but, you know, they had, she had, they never put money in the bank. You didn't put it in there, you'd lose it.
Did they have a lot of dust storms and so on?
Yeah. And this was Mom and Dad, the first house when they first got married, which would have been, let's see, about 42. About 40, I guess I should say that. And in the house they lived in at that time, they got pictures of it where the dirt blew over. There was dirt banks, drifts of dirt that clear up to the roof, eaves on the barn and the house from the 30s, you know. And that was. It's hard for us to visualize that. You know, I've seen droughts, but like Dad said, some of the droughts now have been as bad as it was then, only where farming practice was so much better.
Yep. Conservation wasn't really on people's minds until after the 30s.
Yeah. And no-till is just totally, this right in this particular area, we kind of have some people have been no-tilling for a long time, and man, it's done everything for this particular area. And even, you know, of course we didn't have the grasshoppers that ate everything off, but there's so much vegetation left on top of the ground that I don't know. They talk about those grasshoppers eating the wooden posts. It's hard to believe, but I'm sure it's right. And the road's getting greasy with the grasshoppers, and I've seen that in my lifetime a couple times where the highways actually got slick from grasshoppers getting smashed on the road. And when I was little and they told that story, I really didn't believe them. But I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Another major, I guess you could call it a milepost in rural areas, was arrival of electricity. Was that a big thing for your family?
Oh, absolutely. Big thing. I remember we've talked about that a lot and talked about it lately. The old... Actually, my folks, and I don't remember this, they had a carbide tank, carbide gas, that had lights in the house, and I must have been too little for that when they first moved to Ideal. But then they got the old generator, a gas generator with all these batteries in a shed out there. And I can remember Dad, and, you know, he ran that generator for a while and charged the batteries up, and then he shut it off, and when electricity went off, we went to bed. Mm-hmm. And I remember when neighbors would come over to play cards, you know, or visit or something, and we'd go out there, and I'd go out with Dad, and then start the generator up, keep the lights on a few hours longer, you know, and I can just remember that. And then, of course, so that's something that, you know, cooperatives have done so much, and I've learned so much about. People don't realize how many cooperatives there are, and what all cooperatives have done. There's Telephone, Golden West is a cooperative, Rosebud Electric's a cooperative, Safeway, or I don't know, not Safeway, but Affiliated Foods, and there's lots of cooperatives in the food industry. And, you know, I don't think the country as a whole doesn't realize what cooperatives have done for the country.
There's probably nothing that's changed life out here as much as having electricity.
Oh, absolutely changed the world. The only thing that I would say that's probably done in this part of the county was a rural water system. In fact, when I was on the founding board of that, and I helped start that, and it was probably my most rewarding job I've ever had, because you could actually see what you did. You know, it wasn't it was a measurable quantity, you know, very measurable. But and people in this end of the county would tell you if they had to give something up, they'd give up electricity and telephone long before they'd ever give up the real water. Because it was so hard on us that we had to haul water. All there is up here is artesian water, and it was lousy. And my dad and the neighbors had a 1,000-gallon tank that they bought together, and we put it in a truck and go to winter and get a load of water whenever we ran out. Well, can you imagine with the amount of kids we had in our family? It was a tremendous project, and it'd get muddy, and in those days the roads weren't all that good. It was a real project keeping water out here. And Norma, for instance, can tell you about when we first moved here we're still that way. And I'll never forget that. Once her grandmother passed away, and we had a bunch of relatives come here for her grandma's funeral, told them that they could stay at our house. Get up in the morning to take showers to go to the funeral. We're out of water. Had to send them over to our neighbors down in Furniture and take a shower so we could go to the funeral. And Dad and I have talked about it a lot. We always laugh about it, but it always seemed like that's when you ran out of water, was Christmas or a family get-together when there's a lot of people there. No, you're out of water. We got to run it down to get water. And it didn't always happen, but those are the times you remember. And it's and that isn't a cooperative, but that was, you know, something that rural America, you know.
Well, it's close to a cooperative. It operates by it's people working together. And
absolutely right.
That's the basis of a cooperative. Certainly. What about high school? Did you attend high school?
Yeah, I attended high school in winter.
Did they ever have a high school at Ideal, or was that?
They did, but that was before my time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Had there been a lot more farms earlier on before the Depression?
Oh, absolutely. Almost every quarter was settled at one time. And the 30s. I'll tell you though, I like to visit with my dad about these things because he's been around a long time, you know. And The exodus from the farm started right after Homestead Days. Absolutely started the next year. And it really did. And it has never stopped. It sped up during the 30s. Maybe sped up some of the early 80s. But it's never... they talk about there was a high school in Ideal. There was a teachers, or like a dorm for the teachers to stay in. Big building over there at Ideal. I remember that when it was still there when I went to school, but it wasn't operable. But yeah, I mean, Ideal had a basketball team. And
How many people live over there now?
Well, that's turned into a Native American village that was not there back in those days.
Yeah.
That was, my dad was instrumental in getting that village there. The Native Americans lived on the creek and up on the river, and they didn't have good food, and he was on the school board, and the Ideal probably had one of the first school lunch programs in the state, because those kids were coming to school and not having sufficient food. So him and Wayne Lapsley and Ralph Vanneman went to Pierre, and they got after the state, and then they got these people to move to that village so the kids could go to school. They were living over here along the creek and up on the White River, and of course the kid couldn't get to school. If the weather was bad or whatever, and they got them to move. And I don't recall because I was a little kid then, but they got the.
This is maybe back in the 1950s?
Yeah. This is in the 50s, and they got the Native Americans to move up there on Indian ground, and so they were closer to go to school, and then of course they started a church and things there, and it really helped them. And the kids at least they got one good meal a day.
Yep.
But that was kind of, I thought that was something great that they did.
College, did you ever think about college, or did you go?
Yes, I did. And I'm sorry that I did not go. I wanted to. I thought about going, but the reason I didn't, my folks wanted me to go, because they were very well, and Mom went to college, and I think I was scared to leave home. And I've learned since then, my kids and all my sisters and brothers, when they went to college, my kids, we were sitting here talking one night, and every one of them, when they were freshmen in college, they'd go home every day, or often. And Ginger was telling us, she says, Mom and Dad, she said, if one time you would have said, just come home, she said, I'd have been there in 2 minutes. I'd have packed my bags and I'd have been there. And these boys are the same way. They all got really homesick got better after the first year, then they were gone forever, But it was, and then, visiting with people, everybody struggled with that. It was really breaking away from home is tough to do.
Yeah, a little easier maybe if you can go off to the same college with some of your friends at the same time.
Yeah.
Where did you meet your wife?
Well, she's from here, from this area, and she was working in the bank, and at that time when we first met, she worked at Ranchers National Bank. I banked at a different bank, and her and her sister, they had a little grocery store out in Whitten that they ran together. And anyway, one of the guys that worked at Ranchers Bank, Ray Razoo, and we always give him a hard time because we still see him and we're very good friends of his and his wife. And Ray told me, he says, George, he said, there's a real nice looking girl down there at the bank, and she's really smart. So I thought maybe that would be an interesting thing to look into. So I'd stop over at the grocery store and get groceries once in a while. So that's kind of how we met.
Okay. And when did you get married?
December 14th. And when did we get married, sweetheart? 34 years ago.
December 15th of 72.
Okay, December 15th, 72. Okay, I knew. That's close.
Okay.
And,
You have kids?
yeah, we've got 4 children. And our oldest boy, Trent, and his wife, Becky, live in Winter. He's a chemistry and physics teacher in Winter, and she's a registered nurse. Our daughter, Ginger, and her husband live in Humboldt, Iowa. And she's got a degree in microbiology, and he's got a master's in business administration. He works for Fort Dodge Animal Health. He's the head of quality control for Fort Dodge Animal Health. And then our 3rd child, Brent Olson, or we call him Ole, he's a teacher in Cologne. And then our youngest boy, Sam, is in senior or junior and a half or whatever in Madison right now. Going to be a teacher.
You raised a batch of people with a commitment to education, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about that, I guess, and one of my old comments was that, education is the greatest tool there is, and we really wanted our kids to get in. It's just important for them, and they've done well, and I'm proud of them. And ignorance is a very difficult thing to fight. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but that's, I've run into people all the time in the things that I do that they're really upset with things, and mostly it's because they don't understand them. And really it comes down to a lack of education. And not necessarily a college degree, but they don't educate themselves on that particular subject they're talking about. Or the thing they're looking at, the issue they're looking at.
I'm guessing you got some grandchildren around here because I see a dollhouse sitting there.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We have 6 grandchildren. Let's see, 5 boys and 1 girl. And they're run from. Let's see, Derek must be 5. Michael's going to be 4 here any time. Then who comes after that? Isabella, and she must be 3. And then Luke is 2. And Isaiah's 1. Did I get them all? Oh, no, I got a new one. Zachary, he's just 5 months old or so.
You would have graduated in high school in what, 1963?
Yeah.
Military service?
I was in the National Guard.
National Guard.
Served
okay.
6 years in the National Guard.
Okay, and where were you at with that?
Well, I was in the winter unit. I was a medic in the winter unit. We never got called up, so
Not in Vietnam.
No.
The winter unit has been called up.
Yeah, but we didn't.
In other circumstances.
There was a reason that winter didn't get called up. Why the guards didn't get called up in the Vietnam War. Do you know why that was? One of my good friends stayed there in the guards. In fact, we joined at the same time, and he stayed there and became a general. And he said I ran into some stuff that got declassified, Well, the thought was that Russia was going to get involved in the Vietnam War, invade Western Europe, so they kept all the guards in reserve to send to Western Europe. And that's why they didn't call up the guards during the Vietnam War. Never knew that till just a few years ago. It got declassified, and Bob was a general, and he got a hold of it. And he said, I always wondered why we didn't. And he said, now we know.
Okay. When did you first get involved with cooperatives, as far as an active participant?
I did business with them, right away, but I went actively involved was like 21 years ago.
Okay. You mentioned some other boards that you were on. Maybe we should touch on those before we get to the to what's now Country Pride.
Yeah, well, just they were little boards like the Beef Committee and the Trip County Fair. Norm and I were 4-H leaders, and we helped with the county fair. And let's see, what else did I? Yeah, I told him Trip County Water User Board. Of course, I was on the original board of that. And
they always say if you want to get somebody to do something, find somebody who's busy already, because the people who aren't busy probably aren't busy for a reason.
Absolutely, that is a total fact. That is I've served on lots of boards, and probably this one I would say is probably the best board that ever was served on. And because when you want to run for the board, we're going to send you a letter, and we're going to tell you what you're going to have to do, and the kind of training you're going to have to take, and how many hours you're going to have to commit to it. It's not good old boy, well, we'll sit around and BS and play a few cards, because the company is too big for that. You can't do that anymore. And I think, that Trip County Rural Water Board, those people that they put on there were so desperate for water. They were the right people at the right time. Man, they were dedicated. They worked for nothing, and they really... It was rural water systems at that time weren't around, and there was just one little one up in by Belfouche, I believe it was. And these guys were real pioneers that got on there, and they'd never built one this far north that had to bury the water. I remember getting involved in it a lot, and they were used down in Kansas and Oklahoma. They had them, but they only had to bury the pipeline 3 foot deep, and they were a little thicker populated. And boy, trying to convince FHA that we were going to make this thing work at that time was really not. I mean, they kind of looked at you awful skeptical of, what are you guys talking about?
It seems like I've been told they ran through the same struggle with electricity by originally saying you had to have people so close together, and they were too far apart out there. Yeah.
And the difference in people, and you'll love this story, and probably not a good thing to put on the tape, but we can. But my father one time, and there was a guy when I was on the Rural Water Board, and this guy called me up and really chewed me out because this thing would never work. Anyway, I'm kind of hurt my feelings. So I go over to my dad's the next morning, to feed in our feedlot, and we're telling Dad about this guy. And Dad starts laughing, and I said, "What's so funny?" He said his dad fought REA, he fought the telephone company, and they would never work. There was no way people were going to talk on a line, and their electricity, you couldn't do that. The last guy on the line wasn't going to get any electricity, and it just, how that got bred into that family. And it can't be done.
Yep.
I know a guy called me on the rural water system when I was on there, and he said, "George, I don't understand." He was a friend of mine, I knew him quite well. And he said, "George," he said, "when everybody turns the hydrant on, the last guy on the line is not going to get any water." And I said, "Well, Ron," I said, "we're good friends, but I said, I'm not an engineer. But I said, if I go to New York City and I go to the top of the Empire State Building, and I said, I'm going to get a drink of water. And that engineering feat of that is a lot more than this little rural water system is. I'll tell you, they aren't even in the same league." I said, "I can't tell you how it's going to happen, but it's going to. It'll do it."
Let's talk a little bit about the co-op at Winter. Do you know what? That's been there for quite a long time, hasn't it?
Yes, it was started in. Would you like to have dates?
Oh, well, if you've got the dates readily available, but if you just have an estimate, that's fine too. We're not.
It was in the mid-30s. I think 33 or 34.
Yeah, pretty standard for oil companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it started out with Winter, and then they had Witten and White River and Mission, or grew into that. And there was a lumber yard out at White River. All they were was in petroleum, I think. And then they had the lumberyard at White River. And then sometime during, let's see, that would have been when we first got married in the 70s, the Witten one closed. They closed it, but it was just too small. And then they closed that was probably after I got on the board, or right as I got on the board, they closed the lumberyard in White River.
They still have an oil station?
Yeah, we have an oil station and a convenience store there. A small convenience and a little hardware store. And then that particular one, because that town we're pretty important to, we have a mechanic shop there. It's the only place for miles around anybody can get a car worked on. We have a hard time making it be profitable. We said, well, if we can get it to break even at least, we'll kind of keep it open because the community needs it.
Yeah, and a question of providing service is part of the mission of a co-op.
Right, and in a small town like that, you can be pretty important to the town. Yeah. And, so we've kept that, and our managers have done a good job. That thing lost a lot of money when I first got on the board until we finally got people in place that fixed it. So it's at least paying its own way, not dragging from the rest of the company.
Sure.
Then as we proceeded, we merged with the Dallas Co-op. They called us and they were having financial problems, and they had a branch in Fairfax. No, wait a minute, that's not correct. I can't remember what all we did here. But anyway, the Dallas elevator, and they had an elevator in Cologne and one in Winter that they just bought. And so we merged them in with our company, but they sold Cologne off before they did that. And also at the same time, Burke had a branch in Fairfax. So we merged Burke and Fairfax in at the same time. I don't have the dates we did that.
Yeah.
That became Dakota Pride then. And then as we could see what was happening with cooperatives, and actually I've been thinking about that since you called me, cooperatives were intended to get farmers together so they could buy in larger volumes. Actually, what's going on in the cooperative system today is the same thing, except it's with cooperatives, not with the farmers. That's why we merged all these together, so we could. Actually, the same thing. It just, you don't think about it, but if you look at it, that's really what's happening. And so anyway, then Freeman called us, and they were a good, healthy co-op. Not real large, and we weren't that big, or we were getting bigger, but. And they wanted to look into merging with us. And so did Parkston. So we kind of put things together, and when they voted on it, Parkston voted it down. But Freeman voted to merge with Winter. So we made that. We decided to go with the name change, and we started a whole new company, and that's when Country Pride became. We were looking for a name because we thought we would probably draw some cooperatives out of Nebraska. Instead of having Dakota Pride, we were going to have Country Pride. And that was our thought process behind that. And then after that, Chancellor came along, and they were having financial problems, and they got involved with us. And then Menno in what was that little town we had to go up?
Lesterville?
Yeah, Lesterville. Lesterville and Menno came together. And interesting thing how things worked there. Lesterville was way too small. It just wasn't feasible. And we sold that off to another cooperative, and they thought, and that's fine if they can handle it. There's a river there that breaks. There's a breaking line. Interesting how things work like that, but you can't get people to cross that river. They have a trade territory that's been established for many, many years, And you think you're going to make them go that way, but it does not happen. And it's pretty hard to break. And, and that was fine. And we saw, so we sold that off to another cooperative. And then we had an opportunity to buy a private company at Meckling and Vermilion and Out Point. And that's called Plains Ag, but that's wholly owned by Country Pride Co-op. Okay. Those people in that area, the reason we did that was they were not cooperative people. They were used to dealing with privates and were not really cooperative minded. And we thought, well, okay, we can still deal with this. So that's how we did that. We just left Plains Ag as a private company, but it's wholly owned by Country Pride, and all the profits go into Country Pride Co-op, which is really good for our farmers because profits get spread between our farmers.
To share them with the guys down there.
Yeah, and then Wagner came along here when we do them about 2 years ago. They came and wanted to talk to us, and that worked out real well. Probably the best. Freeman was probably and Wagner were excellent. There was no animosity about. The people got behind us. And right away, the customers and in the communities. I can tell you from experience now, I've been through a lot of these votes and different things, and if there's animosity in the community, it makes them very difficult. When we went and did our vote back when we did Freeman and Parkston and Winter, and at the meetings, in Parkston, everybody was standing in little groups talking, and they went and talked to us. And I said, I got a really bad feeling for this. Over in Freeman, we go over there, and I don't know these people from anybody, We walk in there, and they come up and shake your hand and welcome you to the community. And I said, I can tell you right now how this vote's going to go. And the same way with Wagner. And we told them, we're up front. If you want this to work, you have to get behind us and support us. You can't, if you're going to walk away and not do any business with us anymore, then we just will not do it. It's your cooperative. You just own part of a bigger cooperative is all, but it's still your cooperative, and they have been really good about that. Menno and Chancellor, all of them have. But there's some of them you worry about because they're. One thing I find in these small towns is that they're really leery. It's just like the school issue. Exact same thing. And, we lose our cooperative and we lose our school and our town's going to die. The trouble is they're probably right. Yep. It's sad, but it's true. But in the same token, sometimes you can't. They're just not efficient enough units to run. Luckily, we haven't had to do too many. The one in Cologne we couldn't run, but we try our hardest. If we can make them work and service the community, then we'll keep them alive, and we've been able to. We've got a real good manager now, and we've had some good managers in the past, but it's entirely different mindset of the whole board than it was when I got on there. And commitment that you have to make. And I think one of the best things we've done is, if you want to run for the board, we want you to run for the board, but here's some rules that you're going to have to, some things you're going to have to do, or that we can't tell you have to do it. Here's what we'd like you to do to be on the board, and here's how much time we think it's going to take for a commitment.
Is it expected that board members would be patrons of the co-op?
Oh, absolutely,
Because in some instances you see people who aren't, and that's not a very good sign for the community.
No. Well, when Barry and I started out, that board there was absolutely horrid. The president of the board had done $7.50 worth of business at the co-op in the past year. And we, this won't work. I'm sorry, but you guys, I don't think you have a right to run for the board. I mean, that's kind of what. Actually, we have a nominating committee now, and they call people, but they go to the manager, and we find out how much business. You can be nominated from the floor, but no, it usually doesn't. I don't know if it did happen one time, but
doesn't happen a lot.
Doesn't happen a lot, but we got. Why would you be interested in the co-op if you aren't doing any business there unless you want to cause problems or something? If you're trying to do something wrong with it, but otherwise, the people that do a lot of business at the co-op, they've got a vested interest. Number one, plus they do a lot of business there. They know, here's the services that we need, guys, because that we don't have, or whatever, or how we can improve our services.
Sure.
And
one of the first members of the South Dakota Co-op Hall of Fame was Albert Schramm. Did you know Albert?
Yes. No.
He had been involved in a lot of cooperative efforts over the years.
He was the original founder of the Farmers Co-op in Winter. And then he was on Farmland Industry Board of Directors too.
Yeah. And later on was a legislator.
Yeah.
Did you have somebody, obviously you may have had to chart your own course, but did you have somebody that you viewed as a role model when you first got on the board? Was there somebody that you knew, or did you kind of set your own standard? Because you talked about some of the guys on the board not being good role models.
Yeah,
Maybe you were looking at how not to be a...
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the first things, the rural water, when I was on the rural water board, I took a lot of courses. They always had educational deals for board members, and I even, when I was chairman, I had the state rural water person come down and give a lecture to our board a couple of different times, like once a year, and give us kind of a refresher course on what board responsibilities were. And then I took a lot during that time when I was on the rural water board. We were younger, and I went to a lot of annual meetings and stuff, and they'd have speakers and breakout sessions that you could go to. And now there is, South Dakota Association of Cooperatives does a real good job. They every year they have one or two classes, don't they? I don't go anymore because my boys are all grown. I'm on this farm by myself, and I'm too busy. But a lot of your younger board members, that's the kind of things we want them to go to. And then Senex Harbor States, they have a school every year in Mitchell. And so that's kind of, I think I learned from YCL when I was in grade school.
Young,
what was that called? YCL?
Young Citizens League.
Yeah. And then they used to make us, our teachers here at Ideal, and you had to conduct a meeting. And you knew.
That was pretty much throughout all the country schools, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was great. You didn't know what you were learning then that you would use the rest of your life, but it was an excellent thing. And of course, then I got a book from Robert. Barry and I were having problems when we got this board first started, and finally got Barry elected as president, and I was vice president, and we were still having some difficulty with some board members. And I had a sister going to college at the time, and I called Margie up, and I said, "You go down to the library and you buy me a book on Robert's Rules of Order." And so I studied that quite well, and we learned how to, that was what we did. And at least at that time we were questioning some of the things that were happening, and we'd had nothing to back us up with. And here I had something, and Barry, and he said, just make sure we're on the right page, and we're doing the right things. And so that's how that went.
Yeah. You talked about some of the acquisitions. What were some of the other issues when your earlier years on the board, you've talked a little bit about the problems that the co-op was facing. What sort of problems were those, and how did you deal with them?
Oh, that's good. That's probably one of the biggest things that, and it was a lack of training on the board members, but they thought they were supposed to get in and manage the co-op. Help manage it, micromanage it, I should say, and then some things that happened and that were going on is the auditor. They didn't understand that the auditor worked for the board. The manager, and I don't want to step on any toes here, but the manager he thought the auditor worked for him, and the auditor audited the books, and the board got told what they wanted to hear, or what he wanted them to hear. That isn't what an auditor does. The auditor works for the board of directors. He didn't work for the manager at all. And, and we got, that was one of the things that Barry and I got, no, wait a minute, dear, it says right in our bylaws, what's supposed to be done. Of course, nobody went back and looked at the bylaws ever. There's such a bunch of bylaws back that that they had, but nobody paid any attention to them, and the board members, and they meant well. I'm not saying that I ever saw a board member that got on the board that meant bad. But he did bad things because he didn't, like board members talking to employees. And you have to be really careful about that. You need to know what's going on in the co-op, but I can't go down to the fertilizer plant manager and start bad-mouthing the general manager, so to speak. But the fertilizer plant manager needs to know. He needs some input from me, but you have to, that's a really fine line there of how you handle that situation, and don't get, in these, what I've seen board members, and they meant well, but they'd go talk to the truck driver or whatever and badmouth the general manager, and pretty soon they had all employees upset. And Norma, she's managed.
It's happened in more than one community.
Lots of them, right? Yes, it has. It's happened a lot, and I've seen it just about all the ones we merged together, that there were some problems that way. Norma manages the Holiday Inn Express in winter, and she managed the Golden Prairie Manor before that, and just there's some fine lines there, and boy, you got to watch out when you cross them. But those people meant well. They just really, and from one thing, you can't go on to a board meeting or make decisions that what's in it for me. That's a no-no.
Did you have any problem with board members who expected maybe special treatment?
Oh, absolutely. There's another thing. Yes, terrible. It was really bad. And they got it before I got on the board. They were getting it. And I said, wait a minute. That's the one thing you can't do. And, the board members probably aren't going to get treated as well as the other customers, because it just doesn't look right. And, you probably give up some things being on the board, and a little bit of that, because it just, boy, there's nothing that will get the community stirred up if they see George Olson getting a better deal than everybody else. Oh, Lordy. That will cause grief beyond belief there, I'll tell you.
And of course, letting accounts receivable get out of hand. Is always a problem for co-ops.
Yeah.
That are not watched.
Well, and that was when I got on the board, that was one of the things, that accounts receivable had gotten completely out of hand. And, it was a good old boys thing back then. And one thing that I found that we still struggle with when we take over a co-op, and most of those co-ops all had the same problem that we had back there, but the co-op got to be the banker. and I'll pay you at harvest, or I'll pay you when I sell my calves in the fall. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, guys, but we're not the bank. Yeah. We're not a financial institution, and we're, the bank's right down there. We'll give you, anything you need, but you go talk to him because that's his job. Our job is to sell fertilizer and fuel and buy grain and service the customer, but we're not in the banking business, and that's a real. Almost every co-op we've taken over that's been a real problem for them in trying to get those accounts receivables straightened out again. Yeah. Once you get the people, they really get balk. They don't like it. Down there, the private that we bought out down there in Romania, Out Point, he financed everybody. Mm-hmm. He had a lot of money, and he financed everybody. Well, we don't do that, and all those guys, we lost quite a little business over the deal, but it's just one of those things, we can't do it. Yeah. And margins are too short. Mm-hmm. One thing people see now, they worry about is losing their competition. My 21 years sitting on Country Priority's board of directors, the competition is tougher now than it has ever been, than it was 21 years ago. And everybody thought we were going to lose competition, but it didn't. That didn't work that way. It got tougher. Margins are slimmer now than they've ever been. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a good for instance. When I got on the board, we were doing, and these are approximate figures, but it's a very good comparison, doing $68 million worth of business, and we were making about $500,000 a year. There had been some years that didn't work out, but it's a good example. Now, this last year we did, was it $68 million, and made the same half, $550,000. That's how things have changed. So it just, and you say there isn't any competition, you're buying up all the competition. It doesn't look to me like that's what's happening, is it? Competitions get tougher. And it's just a different world out there. Interstate highway systems, better transportation, better communication, and these bigger farmers, they'll go. Mm-hmm. They got their own semis. They'll buy something somewhere else if they can get it cheaper. Probably have lost a lot of loyalty that we had back when co-ops were first started, mm-hmm. As input co-ops. Don't have the loyalty anymore at all. Yeah. Lost a lot of that. Yeah. But that's some things that we struggle with now as a board member, how to deal with that.
I think that's pretty well universal across the state.
Yeah. So. I mean,
you talked about Barry Jensen. There's some other interesting and good folks you had a chance to work with over the years?
Oh, yes. There's been a lot of them. Some of them passed away. Jerry Schwarting from White River got on the board early on back then. Gary Christensen, he's still on the board. He's a neighbor over here. He was on back quite a while. He was probably got to be the swing vote at the time where our co-op was going to go. And when Gary got on, like Gary always talks about it now, he was a pretty young kid, and he said, you had some pretty controversial issues, and man, I didn't know what to do. But Wayne Covey was on, his father was on the original board of directors. And Wayne was on, but he passed away on us, and he was in Jim Forgy in the early days. Now we have I think a little bit of problem that I've seen in co-ops, and was with this co-op, there was a bunch of guys on there that were retired. Mm-hmm. And nothing wrong with retired people or older people. Now I've gotten to be one, so they don't. I shouldn't say that. I thought that was great of my neighbor, Ryle Vanneman, to come over and tell me that, I'm 65 years old and I think you should get in here. And, and of course then I was only about 40 years old. And, but that was great of him. Mm-hmm. It took a heck of a man to say that and do that. Of course, he's known me since I was born, and I've had great respect for. We're really good family friends together, right next door to each other, and have great respect for each other. But that, it takes a man to admit sometimes that maybe I don't have the right training to be on here.
Yeah. Do you think maybe sometimes the best composition for a board perhaps is a mixture of the experienced people with new people?
Yeah, that's exactly what we have.
Sometimes you get too many new people on board and they don't know the background.
Right.
You can have the same thing as you said with too many old people.
Right. Now we got Barry and I at 62, Cody Jurgensen at 31 or 32. And there's that Mike Miller's probably about that age from over there at Chancellor or the Freeman area. And we got everybody in between. Mm-hmm. And we just...
How many do you have on the board now?
There's 11 members.
Is that a little unwieldy? That's a little large, isn't it, for
yeah, it is. It is.
A lot of territory.
We cover so much territory. We decided we had to do that. Yeah. There's been, there's two different philosophies on that. Like weed growers, they've got 25 people on their board. Then you get, I remember we talked about it, is that board should only be 5 members. Mm-hmm. Because you couldn't get a decision made with, now I think we were like 7 or 9 at that time. And, well, you can't ever get a decision out of that many guys. But I'll tell you what, if you handle it right, and Wheat Growers has been a success of handling a bigger board, and I think Country Pride, if you got the right mix, and it takes a pretty strong chairman. I'll say that. You gotta be on your. I don't like being chairman. I took a class on this one time, and they said if you ever have anybody in the board you don't like, is make him chairman. And I've talked about it to the new chairman. The only reason he took it was if I would sit beside him and help him, and he's a real good young man. But he wanted me there with him, and that's fine, and it's great. But when you're chairman, it's hard to get involved in the discussion because you're trying to run the board meeting. The manager's probably or the secretary's handing you papers that you need to sign. You're trying to get draw everybody out. You have this quiet guy here that never said anything, and you got Joe Blow over here that won't stop talking. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have to referee it a little bit, and pretty soon you don't get to have any input in the decision. And I took a class on that one time, and they were talking about that. That was just, I'll tell you what, I watched it over the years. It was really interesting because that's just exactly what happens. But, I'd rather not be chairman. I kind of got into it I've been chairman several times, but the last few times it was kind of by default. I was vice chairman and the chairman left or something like that. Mm-hmm. So then I ended up getting back in there. Not because I wanted in, but we're training some. Now we got a younger chairman and a younger vice chairman, and they need experience. And I told them we can't. You don't want old people. Somebody be chairman for life. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like Idi Amin being president for life is not a good thing. Mm-hmm. You need to move it around a little bit. And one time we did have the policy, or tried to get the policy in our company that everybody should serve as chairman. But that didn't work out real well because on a larger board, you had people that didn't have quite the leadership skills, and then that.
And you can run into a little bit of a problem that way. I belong to a service organization. And we had a rule that you served as president for 1 year and then you were out of it. But that's fine as long as you got a number of people who are ready to do that. But
right.
If you run short, you can run into trouble.
You bet. And so that's not always good either. But it's,
let's go to a slightly different topic. The cooperative here has been a long time, or was a long time affiliate of Farmland Industries. How did that relationship go over in past years when you first got on the board? Was that a good relationship?
That was a very good relationship. Excellent relationship. And I guess I don't know where we want to go there. That deal with farmland, I happen to know a lot about what happened there. Or quite a little bit about it. And there's a thing of having a run on the bank. Farmland in the end, what happened was, as far as and I got pretty close information, but that guy in Wall Street, and the Wall Street Journal wrote an article about him being heavily leveraged, and they get in the run on the bank of $17 million a day, and they couldn't cover it. Actually, when farmland ended up selling out, they paid everybody. They were solvent. It's just somebody. It shows you what can happen.
There were a lot of people who had debentures, and those were the ones who got paid up. Did the co-ops get their equity back?
No, we did not. Yeah, we lost our equity.
Yeah.
But actually, as a cash flow thing, farmland was all right. But they had that run on the bank with those debentures, and they couldn't come up with the money fast enough. And they only had one alternative, was file bankruptcy to get their stuff and run on the bank, which happened to banks in the 30s. Even if they were solvent, they got to run on the bank and took all the cash out of it. They couldn't operate. And that's similar to what happened to farmland. I'll tell you, this business world is tough, really tough. One of the things, too, that farmland was in was fertilizer. And that has been, if I'm correct, and I think I am, there is no nitrogen fertilizer plants left in the United States, manufacturers. We broke them all. You know how we broke them? Country Pride, all other cooperatives are buying fertilizer, and we'd call up Farmland Industries and we'd say we want 5,000 ton. We'll contract it to you at $200 a ton. Well, gosh, Country Pride only sold 4,000. Well, Farmland, well, okay, you only took 4,000. So then they'd get stuck with the other 1,000 tons. And that happened a lot. And nowadays, entirely different scenarios happened. Boys, if you contract 5,000 tons of fertilizer from me at $220 a ton, I don't care if it went down to $50 a ton, it's coming and you're going to do something with it. And you're going to pay for it right now. And farmland had these things and all these other fertilizer. They'd get stuck carrying fertilizer over, and there was years that they had fertilizer at the ports, and then farmers didn't use near as much or whatever, and then they couldn't move it out, and they had to carry it over a year. And you know what, carrying inventory for a year just eats your lunch. And that's the kind of things that happened to them, and to all the fertilizer manufacturers, private and cooperatives. And now we don't have any. And now when you order fertilizer, it takes 60 to 75 days to get it from Kuwait over here. So when Country Pride wants to order fertilizer, that's just going to get it to the port, and then we got to get it here. So we have to order fertilizer about 90 to 120 days ahead of time.
Is there a certain uneasiness about getting all the fertilizer from places like Kuwait?
Yeah, well, Chuck, I'll tell you my thoughts on it. And we're sitting at our board retreat, and we had a moderator from, I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, and I just brought it up. I says, we're trying to get energy independent, or that's our thought process in ethanol and biodiesel. And I said, and here we're getting all of our fertilizer from the Middle East. I said, you're telling me right now, if we're going to use ethanol, our troops are going to be in the Middle East for the next 100 years, folks. Everybody wants them home next year. Oh, wait a minute. This ain't going to happen. That's he says, you know, I've never heard that point brought up before. But I said, well, that's the way I see it. You know, we're not getting energy independent. We're getting, I mean, ethanol, and I'm not saying I'm against ethanol, everybody is, but I'm just saying if we got to get our nitrogen from the Middle East anyway, we probably haven't changed our position very much, have we?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yeah.
Sure is.
One of the, of course, one of the differences for farmland as opposed to some of the other ag co-ops was that they had managers serving on the board of directors of the regional. Overall, how did that work? Compared to, say, you think that was a good thing or a bad thing to have that?
I thought it was probably a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need some manager's input
mm-hmm.
into, you know, and it shouldn't be loaded, but one thing, managers have a tendency to be better educated than farmers, and I'm not, that isn't, I don't mean to criticize farmers, but they, you know, a lot of them have, nowadays especially, have master's business administration and
mm-hmm.
whatnot, and but then, you know, and they have a point from a view that needs to be heard.
Yep.
So I don't think I'd had any problem with farmland. It didn't hurt them any.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm skipping over some questions here.
Okay.
Sometimes we answer more questions in two or three in one. At the regional level, there were some ongoing discussions. How do you feel about the proposed merger between Cenex Harvest States and farmland?
I think it should have happened. I think it would have been good.
You think farmland would have survived if that
Yes,
happened?
I think it would have. I think, you know, I think that's too bad that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't help agriculture any. Losing farmland did really hurt agriculture more, you know, more than people think it did.
Mm-hmm. Did that have an impact on patron loyalty, seeing that much equity lost?
I don't know if it really did.
Did it impact the obviously it impacted the financial status of any co-op that had been like Winter, that had been a long-term patron there? Probably had. How much equity did you have there? You know?
We wrote off 500,000. The co-op itself did, and then we wrote off our patrons' equity by 1.7 million, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So about 2.25 million.
Not anything you'd ever like to see happen.
No, it was not. I'll tell you though, our board, in their wisdom, somebody back there, one of our managers, early managers when I got on the board,
mm-hmm.
and Barry and I totally agreed with him, we don't pay out equity from regionals.
Mm-hmm.
We just pay out equity on local earnings. And it saved our butt.
Yep.
In fact, I know a co-op we have to go talk to here next week that Carl told me that isn't what they did, and it's not good.
Yeah.
You know, and it you know, they distributed the equity, and then at least ours was just a paper loss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it hurt the farmers some. Shoot, I lose about 40% of my equity in the co-op. And but here's some things that I hear, and we're trying to address those things, and I think wheat growers have done a good job of doing it, and Cenex Harvest States is working on it pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
This paying out equity, paying estates, the joke is on our board is that your wife's new boyfriend gets your money. and somehow nobody appreciates that.
Yeah.
You know, we'd like to see it paid out a little earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
And Country Pride's trying to address that, and wheat growers has done a good job of it. And Cenex Harvest States is trying real hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I applaud them because they're.
It certainly has an impact on the member of the countryside if they think that, I am going to get reimbursed with this money that I've had supposedly, almost like I felt maybe that I had it invested in the co-op.
Yeah, and they're going to get it before they die. And one thing we pay out is that was another thing that used to be a problem early on. I remember when I was younger that actually before I got on the board, but I heard some disgruntled people about it, is they didn't pay enough in cash to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah.
And people didn't like, you paid taxes on the money, but then you never got the money till you died. So we pay cash. We've been paying 40%, and this last year we paid 50% in cash and get that money so the people can pay their taxes on it at least. Sure. And, it doesn't cost them out of the pocket money. And it's things we're trying to do to improve that.
Yep. Getting back to farmland, were you disappointed that farmland didn't attempt to reorganize? A lot of businesses, they go into bankruptcy and then they reorganize and come out of it. Some of the airlines, I think, are in the process of doing that now.
I guess I never thought about that at the time. That'd be a good question to ask Barry Jensen.
Yeah.
Barry and I are good friends, and I don't think I ever asked him the question.
Okay.
I just, I don't know. I think they thought about it, but they couldn't get any bank big enough to take them. I think I'm guessing that probably was the problem.
Sure.
Because they were, of course, that was another thing that they got caught in, unfortunately, and maybe a little business education there. They were dealing with a foreign bank. Got a little cheaper interest rate. Might not have been the right thing to do. Hindsight's 20/20. That goes. A German bank probably didn't. The American bank might have looked at it a little different. The German bank says, we don't care about you. All we want is our money, and type thing. And the American bank may have and may not have. I'm not saying they would have, but I guess it's like me. I like to bank with my local banker because I think he's got a vested interest in the community and in my farm, and
sure.
As a for, I might get better interest rate if I went to Citibank in Sioux Falls or whatever, But does he really have as much? Does he know me as well as they do, and does he know about my community, or and does he have the same interest?
Yeah, and a lot of times people will complain when a local business closes, but then they didn't patronize it as much as they should have.
Right. Yeah, I love that. It's just something we deal with all the time. And Norma, she's president of the Chamber of Commerce. They talk about that every day, every meeting. Well, we don't want this business to close, but man, we'll run to Sioux Falls and do all our shopping. Well,
yes.
I'm sorry, but
you're now patrons with CHS, right?
Yeah.
And there's a trend today that we see I think throughout the region. It's something called regionalization. You're familiar with that?
Very well.
How do you feel about that, as opposed to the local co-op maintaining the structure you have here yet?
That's a very, very difficult issue. Johnny Johnson and I are personal friends.
Yep.
And we just discussed that this winter. He came to our board retreat, and Johnny and I personally sat out and talked about it. And it's... Our problem with it is they're taking our money and using it against us. But Johnny's opinion is that, now if I can quote him right, they make these local operations work on their own and they cannot get money from the regional to do improvements. They have to take it out of their own working capital. And so he feels they aren't. So, it's just... Johnny and Johnny Johnson and I have known each other since we were kids. He's started out as feed salesman, so that's how good of friends and how long we've known each other. And he used to always... How I got to know him is these feed salesmen over in... right outside of Sioux Falls, maybe Beersford or somewhere. I can't remember now.
Yeah, exactly. At GTA Feeds.
Yeah. And then he come out here pheasant hunting all the time. And so I got to know him when we were young men. And we just been good friends ever since. But it's a real stickler with country pride and wheat growers. I know it's a real thorn in our side. How do we deal with that?
I know I've interviewed a former field staff member for CHS, and he suggested that the situation had changed where he said it used to be like a family, and now it's almost like an antagonistic relationship almost.
Yeah, it's gotten better since Johnny took over. It really has, and there's a couple of guys at Senex Harbor States lost their jobs because they were into it. I guess I can say this on the record, but when we were doing, Dallas came to us, they went to Harbor States first. Well, they sent this guy down there from Harbor States, and he told them, well, you can sell out to us now for 10 cents on the dollar, or we'll break you and buy you. Or, you can sell out to us for whatever, and we'll buy you for 10 cents on the dollar in the end. Well, they got mad and came to us, and he didn't. He could have been a little more politically correct. That was, it may have been the truth, but sometimes that's not you got to kind of watch when you're telling the truth. You lose a little sugar with it when you're telling it, because it might not go over real well. Now, like we bought Harbor States in winter, and in Senex Harbor State, Johnny sold it to us. It'll be more efficient if you operate them all together. Now they have an area man, and I can't think of his name, but I just met him once. We just met the other day, and him and I talked a little bit about it, and he said, George, my job is to go out there. What's the best fit for that co-op? Is it better to go with you guys, or is it better to regionalize? And he's helped. He gets us. We're looking at a lot of co-ops right now. There's probably 5 on the books right now that want to talk to us, and we're going to talk to them, and Senex Harbor States is too, probably, and at least some of them, and their regional guy now, he'll tell them, you guys better go to winter, go talk to winter, or go talk to wheat growers, or whatever. Johnny Johnson is working very hard to try to diffuse this problem. I can see that with the people he's put in place.
How would you assess the general situation of cooperatives in South Dakota today? We've talked about that particular issue, but beyond that, you think there's still...
That's good. Something we talk about all the time. Is a cooperative system the right business organization today, in today's agriculture? And it's something we get discussed at our board retreats. I guess we still feel it is, but it's something that needs to be talked about and thought about, and we talk about it and think about it. That if we can get that equity paid back to those farmers soon enough, so that some young man, 30 years old, looks at that, and you give me that equity, and I'm not going to see it till I'm 68 years old. He didn't think about that right now. He's thinking about price. Yep. And so you have to worry about him, and you have to do a better job of getting equity back to the consumer, to the customers, and we try different things. Like I said, we pay more cash out, and those type things, and we're going to try to, if we didn't do all these mergers, we could get this cut back pretty fast and get it down to where you get your money back. And
Sure.
our goal probably is to return your money in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Regrowers does. And, our goal is to get there. But the problem is we keep merging these companies in, and they're way behind, and all they're paying is estates, and then we got to start all over again. Mm-hmm. We can't get it whittled down.
How important is cooperative education? Do you think we're maybe doing enough of that to educate the member and the patron and the potential patron on the value of cooperatives and how they can be a benefit to him or her?
I think we try.
Yeah.
We have a roundtable that works better. We've had meetings and we can't get a turnout. Mm-hmm. So now we have what we call roundtable discussions, and we just invite certain people in, and then you get more one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Just 10 or 12, maybe 20 people at the most, mm-hmm. and sit around as a group instead of a big meeting with 1,000 people there, and you don't seem to get the. So I hope we're making an effort, and I don't. How do you measure that? It's a little hard quantity to measure.
Yeah. I'm down to my last couple of questions here.
Okay.
And I almost everybody answers this one the same. Would you describe yourself as an optimist or a pessimist?
Oh, I'm an optimist.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who ever accomplished anything who was a pessimist.
No, pessimists don't get there.
Yeah, they don't even show up on my screen to go interview them.
That's right. No.
Is there anything that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked you about? I never know quite what I'm going to get out of that. I've gotten some surprises.
Right, yeah, be careful what you ask there. No. I wish something and I don't know, and it's just something we have to deal with, is the school cooperative issue in these small towns, in these small co-ops, and how to deal with that. It just, I think we're doing if anybody could ever give me a better idea, we try different things, and we try to educate them and try to talk to them, but it's, and I can understand them. But in the same token, look what's happened to the farms. In this ideal township there was a farm on every quarter, and they had school buses in the old horse-drawn days, and they talk, oh gosh, now most of the guys, Martin Jurgens is probably the only one still alive that went to ideal school. There was a school bus driver. They said he was such a wild man, they'd upset those buses, set them back up again, and away they'd go. But now we're down to, just in my lifetime, half the farmers in the township, or more than about 3/4 of the farmers are gone. Yep. There's actually in our township, if you called real viable farms, there's probably 3. And there's some other part-time farmers that are still here, but that's, it's really...
What's the land ownership structure here? Is it a lot of renting from people who maybe are distant now but still own the land here, or is it mostly owned by the people who are farming it?
Here's what's happened, and really bad for the winter area, the whole, is the pheasant hunters. They've come in here and bought this land up where no possible way that a young farmer can buy any land. Okay, not only that, they do it for pheasant hunting, and they build lodges out here. Okay, the chamber talks about that all the time. I'll give you some good, for instance, last fall opening weekend, we were in at our son and daughter-in-law's for supper. 10 o'clock we leave. I said, let's drive downtown, dear, just see what's going on. You could have shot a cannon down Main Street in winter and never hit anybody. They fly out here in their Learjets, land in Sioux Falls, or whatever. I mean, they have some Learjets coming to winter, but they stop in Sioux Falls and go to Walmart, get all their groceries, their liquor. Okay, they stop at Cabela's and Mitchell, pick up their shotgun shells, go out to their lodge and stay out there. And all the money never gets spent in winter. Country Pride Farm Store, I can remember when there was pallets of shotgun shells in the farm store, piled high. I went in there at hunting season to try to get me some 22 shells. They had one box, one little tiny box. I can remember there was just pallets of shotgun shells in there. Don't sell anymore.
So pheasant hunting is wonderful for the state's sales tax collections, but maybe not so wonderful for your local community.
Right, the local community. It's real bad, and I don't, I mean, it's just one of those things. All these guys come in here and they've taken land out of production, which I guess it probably helps the rest of us, but sure didn't help the co-op.
Yeah, and is that created an issue with regard to property taxes as far as
I mean,
valuations of property.
Valuations go up, and I don't mean to pick on old Uncle Bill, but he had this property tax relief, and he cut property taxes, but then he raised the valuation. Our taxes never changed, folks. I'll tell you what, if that wasn't that was that old ball trick, or whatever. It never helped, did anything. Yeah. And they're collecting more taxes than they ever have because the land values went up. But it's kind of I know it'll never happen because there's not enough people, and I can't even find very many people that agree with me. This is a philosophy that I have, that I cannot find people that agree with me, that I think we should have a state income tax. I'm a believer that I gladly pay taxes when I make money, but those years when it's dry and I'm losing money and I still got to pay, so I think we have many professional people in this state of South Dakota, especially around Sioux Falls more than ever, any place, but that don't pay as much taxes as they could. But I'll tell you, bro, income tax in South Dakota, and it's just like everybody gets scared and runs.
Yeah.
I just can't.
I've been through enough of those.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about,
I do.
But I think it's a fairest tax.
Yeah.
Man, if I have years out here and I have a drought and I'm losing a bunch of money, and when I'm making money, I'll gladly pay taxes on it. But why do I have to pay the same tax whether I make money or lose money? Is the way I see it. And for somehow, I'd say 90% of the people I talk to don't see it that way. Somehow they don't. They think I'm crazy. But that's kind of how I see things. And so I don't know what'll ever happen.
We had a former Farmers Union state president who used to say there's two separate issues there. One is how you raise the taxes money, and then is how you spend it. And you don't necessarily have to spend more money if you raise it fairer.
Yeah, that's right. I know it. But I had our next door neighbor was in the state legislature, Don Jerson, and he says, and he was he was chairman of the Joint Appropriations Committee at one time. Well, you might have known Don. I don't know. But anyway, Don says there's one thing about government. He was always against raising taxes because Don said no matter how much money you give them, they're going to find some way to spend it all and then some. He said that's just what government does. And he said they're not very good spenders.
Yeah.
And he is probably right. The government's not really efficient.
Yep. Well, I think this maybe looks like a good spot for us to close. We've been visiting with George Olson. Thank you for participating in the Cooperative Legacy Project.
Well, thank you, Chuck, very much. I appreciate it. Much I appreciate it. Much I appreciate it. Much I appreciate it. Much I appreciate it.